Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's session, Supply Chain Management under COVID-19. I'm Felicia Lee from CEIBS Global EMB office. Thank you for joining us tonight. The sudden outbreak of COVID-19 has brought huge pressure on supply chain in China and worldwide. It had affected almost every industry, as well as impacting the country's ability to fight the virus. In today's session, we invited Professor Zhao Xiande and 3 CEIBS alumni, IJ Huang, Damon Gu, Stefano Tiziazzi, and to talk about supply chain management under COVID-19. Our alumni are from SF Express, Maersk, and Whirlpool. They will share the difficulties they encountered and the coping strategy for the situation. Today's agenda including 5 parts. We'll have Professor Zhao Xiande, then we'll move on to the panel discussion with our alumni panelists. If you have any question during the session, please click the Q&A button below and type your question in it. We'll select the questions and invite the professor and the panelists to answer them in the Q&A section. Toward the end, Professor Zhao will give us a summary of the issue we discussed today. And in the very end, we'll invite our senior marketing manager, Marcel, to give an introduction about CEIBS Global EMB program. So before we get started, I would like to briefly introduce our today's speaker, Professor Zhao Xiande. Professor Zhao is a professor of operations and supply chain management at CEIBS. He's a leading expert in the field. He's a JD.com chair in operations and supply chain management. His research interests are focusing on supply chain integration, supply chain and business model innovation, supply chain optimization using big data, and supply chain finance. In the last 5 years, he had published 4 influential books and over 200 journal articles in the leading global journals. He has been recognized as the number 5 of the world's most cited Chinese researchers published the Albert for the 5 consecutive years. In addition to his research, Professor Zhao also served as editor for many journals and academic advisor in the international supply chain community. We're very happy to have him today. So without further ado, let's welcome Professor Zhao Xiande. Hello, Professor.
Welcome to this webinar. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to discuss supply chain challenges and the responses from different companies and also government agencies in coping with the COVID-19. In my lifetime, I think I've only seen huge supply chain disruptions like this one time. And COVID-19 probably has created the greatest supply chain disruption and the challenge for the supply chain professionals. But before we talk about supply chain, maybe let's first look at the number of confirmed cases. Up to this morning, the total number of confirmed cases is over 1.4 million. And 5 countries had surpassed China in the number of confirmed cases, which include USA, 398,809, and then Spain, Italy, France, Germany. Now, China actually ranks number 6. Now, if you look at the threats to the economy, according to a survey, COVID-19 is the most cited and the most serious threat to the global economy. And if you look at the next PPT, you're going to find first COVID-19 created impact in China. And in February, the PMI of China was decreased to 35.7% in February, which is really a historical low. But luckily, due to the effective control of the spread of the virus in March, it bounced back to 52%. And also, as of March 28, the average return to work rate of industry enterprises above the so-called designated sites actually reached 98.6%. And also this morning, we are very glad to see that Wuhan and the Hubei province is unlocked. So after a 76 days of lockdown, now people in Wuhan and Hubei province will be able to go out to enjoy the fresh air, the park, and they will be able to travel to see their friends and relatives, and they will be able to go to work. So although we see all these positive sides in China, but the effect on economy, I think, is much more long-lasting. And I'm going to discuss this a little bit more from the supply chain perspective. But at the same time, we look at US, we look at Europe, the number of cases has increased a lot. And according to some prediction, the GDP growth in the second quarter will be minus 38%. And then for the year, it might be minus 5.5%. And this one is really the largest decline since 1946. And this decline in the GDP has caused huge increase in unemployment rate. According to some estimate, the unemployment rate in Q2 will reach 15.7% in the US. And the cumulative number of unemployed will reach 21 million. And also in the Eurozone, the PMI fall from 51.6% in February to 29.7% in March. Again, a historical low. And the Bloomberg Institute of Economics estimated the largest consecutive economic decline in the history of Eurozone. So apparently, COVID-19 has created severe negative effect to the economy in almost every country. And even though China now is bouncing back due to effective control of the virus, we still suffer from this virus a lot economically. But economics is not really my major area of expertise. My expertise is really in supply chain management. So let us look at the challenge in the supply chain area. First, I'm going to use the time to discuss the challenge in meeting dramatically increased demands for medical equipment and supplies. And secondly, I'm going to discuss the challenge of meeting the demand of daily consumer needs, things like food. And then thirdly, I'm going to discuss the ripple effect on global supply chain. And then after I discuss all these challenges, we would like to invite some real heroes in fighting this virus. They are the executives in different type of companies. And today we are very lucky to have executives from the manufacturing industry and also from the logistic industry. And these executives actually played a very important role in fighting against the virus. In addition, I think in the audience, many people also had a lot of experience and also difficulties and maybe some lessons to share and also some successful experience to share with us. And we are going to give you the opportunity to ask us questions so that we can discuss how to deal with the virus together. And then based on all these discussions, I'm going to try to make a summary for tonight's learning, which is how to improve the responsiveness and the resilience of the supply chain. We call this as the 2 R's of the supply chain. Now, let's look at the first challenge. It first began in China. You know, in China, we have 1.4 billion people. When the virus gets spread, everybody wants to wear masks. And the mask demand actually is 100 times higher than the regular demand estimated by the World Health Organization. But the full production capacity in China was only 20 million per day. But during the Chinese New Year festival, many factories were not working and the workers have gone back home to have the Chinese New Year. according to some estimate, the available capacity was only 40% of the full capacity. And therefore, we really have a huge shortage of supplies in medical equipment and prevention clothings, etc. And many hospitals actually do not used to carry high inventories of masks. And then in overseas, it's really during the recent months, which is March and April, you can find many countries needed things like ventilators, needed things like masks, especially for masks. During the Chinese New Year, and many of the Chinese people needed a mask. Even though we are resting, a lot of people worked very hard to really purchase masks from all over the world. And some foreign people are saying since the Chinese has gotten most of the supply, so when the virus get to Europe and US, they start to find it very difficult to be able to secure some supplies like masks. So as a result, many foreign countries, governors and ministers have been working very hard to try to get more supplies of these types from China. And China is also mobilizing a lot of factory and a lot of logistic company to try to increase the production and try to satisfy the needs in foreign countries. Another supply chain, which is very important to us, is the food supply chain. And when I look at this food supply chain, I classify them into two major types. One is the food supply chain based on restaurant. We all used to go to restaurant to eat, especially during the Chinese New Year. Many people would like to go to the nicest restaurant to have family dinner. But due to the outbreak of COVID-19, many consumers dare not to go to the restaurant anymore. So the customer flow to the restaurant has been stopped. As a result, the demand for the in-dining in the restaurant actually is dropped to almost zero. And luckily, some of the restaurants has been working with internet platform companies and the delivery companies. They are ready to do the home delivery. So as a result, when people cannot go to the restaurant, they want to eat. Many customers order through the internet, so the online demand increased dramatically. So one of the huge challenges is how do we deliver all these food meals to people's homes when we have limited capacity for home delivery and many of the workers have gone back home. And another challenge is after the demand for online channel increased dramatically, how do we secure enough supply on the upstream that included the central kitchen and also the raw material producer and the suppliers. We have the logistic and distribution company helping us to do this, and a lot of B2B supply chain service companies in the food restaurant industry actually played a very important role. And another very important type of company are the internet platform-based home delivery company. They get a lot of order, and they really worked very hard to make sure the food will be able to be delivered to our home. And another type of supply chain is what I call the retail store-based supply chain. Under the new trend of new retailing, what we found is many retail stores, they sell food items, and they also develop in-dining so that customers can go there, buy the fresh, produce the fresh seafood and meat, and they will be able to cook the meal for you. You can consume over there. But due to the spread of the virus, many people do not really want to go to the store anymore, but the home delivery demand again increased dramatically. So as a result, many people will have to get up early in the morning and they will have to really fight to place the order and make sure they will be able to order enough fresh produce, fresh seafood, etc. for their consumption. Again, in this case, to meet the vastly increased demand, a lot of companies will have to work very hard combining online, offline systems in the supply chain, try to coordinate with the upstream and also coordinate with the delivery company to make sure that we will be able to deliver enough food to people's home. Now, after you look at all these challenges and different companies are playing different roles in different supply chains, but from a supply chain perspective, what are some of the innovative things that different companies are doing? So here in this PPT, I summarize some of the innovative supply chain practices according to the following categories. The first category is demand forecasting. Due to the dramatic change in the demand pattern, we cannot really use the regular methods of making forecasts. But if you have experience and data based on past disasters like SARS, and if you have the capability to be able to gather data from social media, from the government statistics, etc., if you are able to combine data from hospital, etc., you will be able to predict the demand for some of the medical equipment and supplies based on the number of cases infected in different cities. You will be able to estimate the demand for masks and protective clothes, etc., maybe based on the number of patients, the number of doctors, and number of nurses in different regions of different hospitals. So the first innovation is for you to be able to use big data to predict the demand for different type of items. And then the second area, facing the shortage of certain medical supplies, many companies actually use their global network to source material from different parts of the world. They also use the internet platform and information technology to do the end-to-end supply chain tracking, so that they will be able to go through the custom, go through the different process through different organizations, and be able to get the supply from foreign countries. The third area is what I call flexible manufacturing. In this area, many companies facing the increased demand, they rapidly increase the production level, and some companies also try very hard to use fewer people to do the production. And some companies also change the capacity of producing garment textile into producing medical supplies and equipment such as masks and protective clothes. And other companies like in the automobile industry, they also use their process innovation and try to create a flexibility so that they will be able to produce different type of emergency items that we need. And then the fourth area is how do you figure out where are the supplies, where are the demand? Can you use information technology, use big data to be able to enhance the supply chain visibility, know where the supplies are, know where the demand, so that you'll be able to help to make a better match between the supply and demand. And then the next area is what I call allocation and rationing. Due to the shortage in supply in certain items, we have to really assess who really needed that most. Those people who are fighting in the front line to treat the patients should have a higher priority than others. So you need to use data to assess the priority and make the allocation decisions. And then the last area is how do you make the related decisions for inventory, warehousing, and delivery, especially when many roads are closed and many areas are locked down, especially in the Hubei province. You need to use data, constantly look at what are the alternative routes of shipping, and what are the alternative ways of delivering different items to different area who needs this type of delivery. And on top of that, since many customers do not really want to be in contact with you, so how can you do the contactless delivery? So in this area, we see a lot of innovations by different companies. Here, I'm only going to cite two cases. One is Jingdong Logistics, using the capability that they have accumulated over the years in digital technology, big data, in smart and intelligent logistic decisions. They were able to work with the Hubei government to set up a system so that the system will be able to find where are the inventories. Are they with the factory? Are they in government reserves? Are they with certain distributors or agents? And who have been donating these items in need, and where are they located? And then based on the information, use their logistics and distribution expertise, they try to decide from which source of supply they should deliver the goods to which warehouse. That includes the provincial central warehouse, the temporary warehouse they set up in different locations, and also the so-called social warehouse. They are the warehouses owned by other companies. And then they also need to look at the demand from key hospitals, from other normal hospitals and other organizations. Through the use of big data, they were able to help the government to manage the supplies from different sources, make the logistic and the distribution decision so that they can help the government to provide the needed medical supply to the most needed people. And another company which played a very important role is Meituan Dazhongdianping. And over the years, they have set up the internet platform and the last mile delivery system to deliver food to consumers' home. But during this virus, due to the concern of the consumer, they also start to do the so-called contactless delivery, which is to figure out a way to put the foods in certain area. You do not have to really contact the consumer. The consumer will be able to pick up the goods. They also use unmanned delivery vehicles. They also use smart lockers for pickup, etc. So these are the different innovations on the last mile delivery part. In addition to that, since over the years, they have been providing IT system solutions to restaurants, to the central kitchen. They have also been providing solutions to the suppliers in managing the supply chain. And they also have solutions for managing the store operations. They have natural contact with these upstream players, and they use the information system to link these sources of supply with the consumer demand, and they were able to use digital technology and big data to help to make sure we deliver the right goods to the right people. So these are some of the innovative practices I have observed in China in meeting the needs of medical supply and also the needs for daily consumer items. Now, let me look at how the COVID-19 has created the ripple effect in global supply chain. First, the stopping of operation in Chinese factories has really caused the production and operation activities in the China supply chain to get stopped or disrupted. And then since China has a lot of factories which produce intermediate components and parts to supply foreign factories, when these factories stopped working, actually a lot of foreign factories cannot get their supplies. On top of that, some of the Chinese factories, since they cannot sell their products, they cannot produce, they also canceled their orders. And these two things cut up the supply to foreign factory and also reduce the demand to foreign factory, also cause a lot of disruption of overseas production systems. And then on top of that, due to the interruption of the overseas production and operation activities in the foreign supply chain, it also negatively influenced the Chinese factory. A lot of Chinese factory need the key components from foreign factory. And since these foreign factory cannot get their supplies, they cannot produce. And as a result, these foreign factory operations start to influence the Chinese factory operation. And then in March and April, when US and Europe start to have more and more cases, they start to shut down many of their factory operations, and the international flow of material through air is also interrupted. So as a result, you see a lot of ripple effects in different parts of the world. One part cause the other parts to stop, the other part stop, cause another part to stop. So that makes the supply chain very, very difficult to manage. One good example is the electronic industry. First, China is the largest consumer electronic markets. And secondly, China really produces a very high percentage of the final products in the electronic business. And over 90% of the world's mobile phones and 90% computers and over 70% of TVs are produced in China. When the Chinese factories stop, there are two effects. First, they cannot supply the foreign companies anymore, the foreign brands who used to get goods from Chinese factory, they cannot get it. And the foreign factory who needs parts from China, actually they cannot get it. In addition, due to the decrease in demand in different channels, the Chinese factory actually start to reduce the production. That reduce the needs for the raw material from overseas. At the same time, when the overseas factories start operation, then the Chinese factory really cannot get the critical components. So from this experience, you can see Chinese factory first get disrupted, and then they influence the overseas brands, overseas factory. And then when the overseas factory stop, that further influence the Chinese factory. And then when the virus spread to Europe and US and Korea and Japan, more and more factories operation get negatively influenced, then these factories are influencing each other. That plus the interruption in the logistic flow due to the cancellation of many flights and many ships that cause further problems in the supply chain. A similar story is happening in the automobile industry. Wuhan and Hubei province happen to be one of the most important place in the automobile industry. They have the largest cluster of companies in producing the final automobile and also in producing the parts. When they have problems that negatively influence the foreign factory, companies like Hyundai in Japan and also some of the Korean brands, Korean factory get influenced very badly. And then later on, these get spread to other countries. And then when other countries start to have problems with the virus, they stop production, and that further influence Chinese factory. Enough for all these complex problems. We are scholars, even though we try very hard to understand this, but we do not really have all the solutions. And the people who really have the solution are these heroes who are fighting in the front line. So today, I'm very happy to introduce 3 heroes to you. The first one is Mr. Eddie Huang, who is the Associate CEO of Shunfeng Express. He is our MBA graduate in 1999. Shunfeng has done an excellent job in delivering the medical supplies and the equipment, and also in delivering goods to meet our needs so that we can stay home and still be alive. And then the second hero is Mr. Damon Gu, who is the global head of e-commerce logistics, Maersk Logistics and Services, and he is our graduate in 2015 in the MBA program. And I happen to be his supervisor in his dissertation. I know him quite well. He has been doing a lot of interesting work to provide logistics services to different type of companies. And lastly, we have Mr. Stefano Tizzenti, head of Asia Procurement, Whirlpool Corporation. As you all know, Whirlpool is one of the giants in the global electrical appliance industry. He is currently in our global EMBA program. And I'm going to start with 3 common questions for all 3 of you, which is, what are the major challenges that your company's supply chain face during COVID-19? And how did your company cope with these challenges? And what are some of the best practices? I know many of you have used all kinds of innovative practices. Try to tell us some of the best practices that you have used. And also, if you can, try to share some of the lessons you have learned from coping with COVID-19. So for this first question, maybe I will ask Eddie Huang to start with answering this question first. Eddie.
Yeah, I think it's really my pleasure to meet everybody online. You know, this is the first time, right? So I think very likely will be a norm in the future. I have done hundreds of video conference calls, you know, already. Normally with, you know, overseas friends, you know, before, and then now, you know, within the company, we're actually doing remote type of, you know, meetings every day. So I have almost 20 meetings a day. So funny enough, you know, what we are talking about here is still, you know, the lessons we learned from before. But, you know, just 5 minutes ago, you know, my Singapore friends called me and they say, you know, let's have a call next week. We're going to talk about whether China can lead the recovery. So people are thinking really, you know, ahead at this moment. So if I recall back to like more than 2 months before almost, right? I think it's a surprise for the company because, you know, we are prepared, you know, for normal operation even during the Chinese New Year days. And then suddenly this virus thing come over and the whole province, the Wuhan city and actually the Hubei province shut down. And it's actually a big disaster for us because nobody knows what the supply chain will be like next day. So every day the situation is changing, right? So that's a big challenge. And we're not really prepared to deal with like this medical thing, like, you know, they double their demand by 4 times at least compared to last year at the same time, you know, in January and February. That's actually a surprise for us. All the capacity are shot. And the air cargo become actually the saving line for us, right? So, you know, we have one of the largest full air cargo fleets in China. So we fly them actually to Wuhan every day. And we try to save our pilots because you can imagine, you know, all the pilots are really scarce resources. If they get sick, then, you know, even the full cargo aircraft cannot be used again. So that's actually a big cautious for us. So at that time, so how to make sure, you know, you have the most flexible supply chain, you deal with the situation every day, you have a good planning, not for long term, actually for hours, you know, every every 1 hour, the routes will be changed. The ground transportation is totally down. So you have to think about how to leverage your national network first to deal with the situation, and use the air cargo flights to make sure you deliver the most needed cargoes into the province. So that's the stage one. And we also, there's something, as a professor mentioned, the countless thing. So, we have the smart box there, right? People are still sending the consumer to consumer type of cargoes. In that way, we have to do the smart box delivery. So you put the things into the smart box, and then somebody, countlessly, they pick up and then deliver for you. So use that way through the smart box to smart box, big data, and IT system back the delivery. You continue to enable people can enjoy it, at least the basic life requirement, as normal. So that's what we are doing, we were doing in Hubei province. And then stage two is actually the international part. And when Chinese, overseas start to buy all the masks and the protection things, back to China, then the imports actually become a big challenge. And then everybody knows, starting from last month, it's actually export pressure. So in dealing with all these situations, we are building the capacity pool. That's actually very critical, As a standalone enterprise, even Shunfeng has more than 500,000 employees, and we try to mobilize everybody to, save this moment, to be on their side, to deliver all the values they can. But that's a big shortage of capacity. So we have to leverage the social capacity, as Professor mentioned, the third-party warehouse, the full cargo aircrafts, and also the truck drivers. That's actually very, very short at that moment, but we deal with that. So you have the system to know where you can find the capacity and how to mobilize them. And then you talk to the government, how to make sure, the government policy can give a door for you to get into the area and also get the transportation back to a normal situation. So that's what I can share with everybody. I think it's unexpected, but the collaboration within the company, try to use the IT technology like smart box delivery, like the full cargo aircrafts, all these, more reliable capacity is what we can do internally. But externally, it's more important you build a social capacity pool to encourage people to share the capacity with you, and try to make the information move smoothly across different parties to make sure we get all the demand and we have the capacity to deliver. That's more critical even today. So thank you. I just stop here, and if any questions, we can discuss later.
Thank you, Eddie. I think he mentioned several key words. One is flexibility, fast, collaboration, and also technology. So in order to meet the fast changing demand, the huge demand uncertainty, you have to plan by the hour or plan by the minutes. You have to be very flexible. When you do not have enough capacity, you have to be able to collaborate and get capacity from other companies. Good. Now, with that, I think I would like to invite our second hero, Stefano, who is the purchasing director of Whirlpool Group. And he happens to have factories in China, has factories in US, and also Italy, and three most famous countries during this virus. Let's invite him.
Thanks, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here and sharing my experience. So as the professor said, just a little bit of introduction. I'm looking after procurement. So most of the things I will be sharing with you are related to procurement, so suppliers. And again, as Professor anticipated, I'm working for Whirlpool Corporation. It's a global corporation, 20 billion revenue with 59 manufacturing technology centers around the world. So a very complex organization. And in China, we have a very important presence with two manufacturers in Shanghai, one in Hefei, one in Hyundai. And also we have several suppliers based in China and supplying all around the world our factories, right? So I want to share with you basically three main challenges that I personally faced with my team here. The number one was really about the visibility across the entire end-to-end supply chain, really from suppliers, part level number, down to consumer, finished product SKU, and really understand real time what is the global inventory position of our supplier, right? From what they have in their warehouse, what is in transit, and what is in our factory warehouse. So really this full visibility end to end. And it started really with China because that was the first outbreak. And as I said, we have many suppliers in China, not just local for local, but supplying to all the regions. They were not still not connected very well from a system standpoint. So the challenges was really about creating this end-to-end visibility. The way we cope with that was the creation of an online-based real-time sharing tracking tool by supplier, by part level number. In Europe, we have Google as a platform, software platform for working, and so Google is really on cloud with real-time visibility across all the site, everyone in the world. So by using this online tools, we've been able to create this end-to-end visibility, really tracking part level number, our supplier down to SKU, so finished product and demand basically in the market. So back to demand and supply, understanding the issue, and then with this visibility, prioritizing the response in terms of expediting shipments or whatever kind of solution that we came up with. The second challenge that we faced was, again, it started in China, but then it became a global issue, right? So how to have a quick and effective internal and external communication at global level, right? As I said, we have 59 manufacturing technology centers around the world, thousands of suppliers, including the one that we have here in China, very important for export business. So communication and the creation, I would say, of a global PMO was very key. And the way, we cope with that challenge was really about creating a global business continuity PMO, which I ended up to lead from a global standpoint for Whirlpool, which is very important. To align everyone, not only procurement, but also manufacturing, supply chain, marketing, and really make sure that we understand with this visibility that I mentioned before, what are the issues, and eventually we even take trade-off, between regions on what's the most important priority to speed up. The last challenge that we face, and I think many companies face these challenges, has been about the PPE supply, so personal protective equipment, so masks, gowns, and whatever. So we ended up really at the very beginning having our US colleagues and other regional colleagues helping supply masks to China, to our operation, because again we were having shortage of those PPEs in China, and now we're doing exactly the opposite, right? Trying to find PPEs here in China and exporting these to other regions, right? So that was something pretty new, actually, completely new, I would say, in terms of capabilities in our procurement, but not only, even our supply chain team. So that was the challenge, and now we cope. We created a dedicated team working on this PPE supply, which is not just about supplying, signing a contract, but understanding the regulation, finding the right supplier. Regulation, which, by the way, are changing every day, especially these days for China export. So that was a pretty big challenge that we faced. Overall, the lessons learned are about importance of real-time visibility. That's very, very important. Importance of creation of a global PMO, a global structure with clear responsibility on driving trade-off across regions. And last but not least was also the creation of whatever kind of process or tools we came up with, make sure that these are scalable, right? Again, it started in China, now it becomes global. So whatever we develop in China was something that we've been able to scale up for Europe, for US. So the importance of creating whatever tools or solution in a way that is easy, scalable at global level. So that's my experience here I want to share with you.
Thank you. That's a very good sharing. Let me try to repeat several keywords he said. One is end-to-end visibility in the supply chain. For a global giant like his, he has multiple factories and many suppliers, and you have to have a system to be able to track the material flow, information flow, and maybe money flow in order for you to be able to deal with unusual situations like this. Another thing he emphasized is the internal communication and coordination. And the global PMO is a very effective practice. And then he also indicated you need to have dedicated teams creating unique and innovative tools to solve problems. And then the solution and tools should be scalable. And I think those three things are really very, very important in dealing with a crisis like this. And finally, let me invite Damon Gu, who has been in the front line and trying to really help with the shipment for his clients. And he has told me quite a few stories before. Let's listen to him.
Yeah, thanks, Professor. First of all, thanks a lot for CEIBS to organize this webinar session. It's always a great pleasure to share my perspective on this important topic. As Professor mentioned, I work in the MERS company. We are one of the global shipping and the logistics service provider. So I would like to share my perspective in terms of the COVID-19 challenges more from our customers' perspective. So the top three challenges, if you like, in terms of the challenges they're facing now is typically number one, there's a major disruption of the manufacturing base in Asia, and specifically in China, as Professor already mentioned. We're famous being the world factory, and the COVID-19 situation just caused many of our global customers just to have a major disruption in their supply chain. And the response of that is typically you would like to have a plan B or even plan C for your sourcing and supply chain providers. But in this current situation, what we have realized is there's actually a huge lack of alternative options because the companies are also facing this dilemma that they want to leverage the buying power. And maybe Stefano can support on that. When you try to get the best possible negotiation position, you try to concentrate all your purchasing power to a very few or supply group. And that situation actually caused the impact of the COVID-19 is much bigger than the otherwise the scenario that you will have a more balanced kind of a global supply base. So that's the top one challenge we see. The second very specific challenge is if you work in the supply chain industry nowadays, you can observe a very extreme air freight market. So as Eddie mentioned, that many of the companies are just struggling to find the capacity in the market to do the air freight shipment, both international and domestic. And then the cost of the air freight space is just going through the roof. And that also caused a major disruption in the supply chain for many of our customers. And you start to see many of the critical supply chain, like automobile, they start to run a big charter plane and air freight projects just to have the critical supply of components to their production lines. And in MERS, we have done a lot of innovative solution. And one of the projects we are doing as we speak is we actually use container vessels or the sea freight to replace many of the air freight shipment, especially for the cross-border e-commerce parcels. In a normal situation, you would be very surprised to know that that's not a very normal solution because the transit time is significantly different. But in the current environment, this service is become one of the key alternative options for many of our customers to continue their supply chain and also international shipment. So that's also a very, very important challenge. Last but not least, we also see, due to the COVID-19 situation, many of our customers' sales performance is also significantly slowing down. So in my 20 years in the industry, we always try to squeeze it off, but it's pretty much the first time ever that most of our customers are actually asking us to slow down the shipment because they don't want to get all these shipments arrive in their DC and have a huge inventory, which will be reflected in their balance sheet, right? So again, we're working on many different solutions including having more storage solution on the origin side in China, including using different vessel options and transit options to slow down the shipment to minimize this impact to their supply chain. And again, this is very much unprecedented. We are here to work closely with our customer just to understand the implication, both from the transit time and cost, and also their overall financial situation. So I just want to share these three key challenges from our customers' perspective, and we can of course further discuss what are the solutions.
Good. It looks like he is a very good manager. He always think about from his customer's perspective. And the three challenges that his customer face, one is a disruption in some part of the supply chain will influence their production. And in order to be able to really keep the supply chain going, you really need to have some type of contingency plans and maybe have some type of alternative suppliers ready. And then air freights, due to the cancellation of international flights especially, become very, very expensive. And then his team is trying very hard to find multimodal transportation using the other modes of transportation to replace the air. And then when his customers' demand goes down, he will have to figure out a way to help them to really store the goods that they cannot use right away. And that also creates additional demands on them. And actually these PPTs are something that Damon gave me, since I have your PPT over here already. And I'm going to start to ask you the second question first. And the second question is, what are the roles of digital technologies and the big data analytics on the responsiveness and the resilience of your supply chain? I think from all three speakers, they've been mentioning responsiveness, speed, and then also ability to resist the risk of the resilience. And at the same time, they also mentioned supply chain visibility, digital technology, and big data really play a very important role. So I'm going to ask Damon to first answer the question as to how digital technology and big data are helping you to improve responsiveness and the resilience of the supply chain or your customer supply chain. And what do you think that COVID-19 may really influence your company's adoption of digital technology in the supply chain? Yeah, Damon, now you got the second question.
Sure, thanks, Professor, again. So I think Stefano already mentioned in his comment that we also fully agree that we believe the end-to-end real-time supply chain visibility is very much the prerequisite to enable our customers to respond very quickly to any type of supply chain disruptions. But I have to say, through my 20 years of experience working in the industry, I think it's very clear that not many companies has actually achieved that. In many terms, we think it's a basic kind of infrastructure. So they for various historical or other technology reasons, that this so-called end-to-end visibility and even real-time visibility is not something very common, even for international companies. I won't mention the names here, but we have a lot of international customers. They are doing, they are the market leaders in their respective industries, but unfortunately, they are still struggling with some very basic supply chain challenges. So my take on the COVID-19 situation is this can actually be a very good wake-up call, if you like, for many of the companies in the industry, and specifically to realize the importance of this real-time end-to-end supply chain visibility. And once you have that, and we do also have very good examples from some of the customers we're working together, especially in the e-commerce space, that they have fully utilized the data insights and the big data analytics to understand what is the demand and what is the consumer behavior and what are the patterns for the consumer to place the order, and then doing this in a very smart way to translate that into their supply chain strategy, and to also create a lot of the rule-based kind of alternative options. And again, I can't emphasize more that the foundation of all these kind of a more fancy supply chain solution and innovation are all based on the basic end-to-end visibility, and all based on a very specific milestone information that when your air freight is leaving the airport, when the container is arriving at the port, when the truck arrives at the warehouse, right? So once you put all the pieces together and connect the dots, then the potential is unlimited, because you can make all kinds of different solutions on top of a very good visibility and a good data point. So that would be my take to the question.
Okay, thank you. I think end-to-end visibility is very, very important, as mentioned by actually all three panelists. But how to achieve it is really the huge challenge. And many companies might be able to kind of be able to solve the visibility problem within their own company boundary. But when you are looking at the global supply chain, how do you ensure end-to-end visibility from your supplier, your supplier's supplier, and then to your distribution channel, and be able to track down your finished products to the consumer's hand? And I think that's really a huge challenge. But during this crisis, I think many companies start to realize, if I do have better visibility, then I will be able to respond faster. I will be able to find the solution and be able to really solve the problem better than without the visibility. So from that perspective, it is very, very important. And for this important question, I also would like to ask Stefano, and he has been mentioning visibility within his own firm, but his firm is so big, involves parts of the supply chain in different countries, and how to link all these different parts in different countries. That's a challenge. And then on top of that, I think he also faced the challenge of linking, let's say, his company to his distributors, to the retailers, and linking his company to his supplier and his supplier's suppliers. So maybe let's hear from him as to what are some of the interesting and innovative things he's doing in solving this visibility problem, and how has the company's strategy maybe changed through the wake-up call?
Yeah, again, kind of repeating a little bit what also Devon said and what I said at the very beginning. The roles of digital technology, in my view, in the future is really going to be around this global end-to-end visibility, right? And I share what Devon was saying before, that even most of the top company around the world, number one in the market, global, they're still lacking this end-to-end visibility, and to a certain extent, Whirlpool is among them. That's why, as I shared before, we are lacking these, and we build this specific, tracker, to really track down from supplier part level down to, demand and factory, and really have this demand and supplier real-time visibility. It took us a lot of work, a lot of efforts, a lot of manpower, frankly, which is not sustainable. Of course, in a crisis management, that's absolutely a must, and we can do that, but it's not really sustainable over time. So what I envision the role of digital technology in the future is really how to optimize and make this real-time, effective, and not really consuming too much of efforts and resources. That's, to me, is the key. And on the other hand, is also, again, connected back to what Demo was mentioning. Funny enough, now, companies are slowing down, and also we are slowing down in certain countries because we push a lot to get components from China now, because of the outbreak, we're slowing down. So I think it's important to have this kind of optimization of inventory position in a proactive way, right? Depending on the risk level assessment. So what I envision in the future eventually, and I'm still thinking more from a procurement standpoint, if you assess supplier from a risk management standpoint, and you're able to connect the supply and demand around the globe, then you can, based on this risk assessment, have a dynamic and proactive reprogramming of routes, for instance, moving from sea to train to air and vice versa, and really trying to build up the best inventory position across the globe. So those are the kind of two key roles I envision and influence to a certain extent of these digital technologies in my company. So the end-to-end visibility, and as well as this kind of optimization of the global inventory.
Good. I think there are really two very important aspects. One is concerning visibility, but when you look at visibility, actually I just read the Harvard Business Review article. Very few companies will be able to map out the entire supply chain network. By that, I mean, you look at the product you make, and then you have a bill of material, and for each material, you have a supplier. But behind the supplier, there is a supplier's supplier. And only when you have complete transparency, you know who are your supplier, who are your supplier's supplier. When things get interrupted, you will be able to find out where is a broken link, and you can fix it, and you will be able to really keep your supply chain going. And that's one level. And another level Stefano actually is really mentioning is through digital technology, when you enhance the visibility, you start to get data from different parts of the supply chain. If you have the ability to analyze the data, you will be able to optimize your decision, your process, and you will be able to get further savings. And also, in a situation like COVID-19, you need to quickly find alternative routing, alternative models of transportation in combination to solve the problem. And if you have data, you will be able to use the data to optimize and select the best combination, the best solution. But if you have no data, it's only based on your experience, then you have never encountered such a situation, and then your experience may not really be good enough for you to come up with the innovative solution. So data become very, very important. Now, for the same question, let me ask Eddie Huang again. I think your company is really putting in a lot of effort in using digital technology and big data analytics. So maybe if you can share with us, especially during COVID-19, how you have been able to leverage over your capability in digital technology and big data analytics to help you to do better.
So my lessons learned, is really, for a more micro level. We are not talking about the end-to-end supply chain, visibility, optimization. We are really looking at the future. Seeing, the customer we are serving, like retail chains, like the food chain stores, like Starbucks, McDonald's, KFC, what they will be facing, what are the challenges they may be facing. What we are thinking about post this virus thing, even in China, you can think about, a lot of people will choose to work at home or from home, right? And the labor supply for the market will be short, at least, for a certain period of time. And use the data and the IT technology, how to actually enable them to work remotely. Think about, if a McDonald's store can reduce 30% of capacity, the labor capacity in the store, and actually allow their employees to work on a more flexible schedule. So they can do 3 or 4 shifts a day and choose, when they want to be in the shop. In that sense, we can really keep people safe and reduce a lot of, these kind of, the cost issue, and also given the demand is uncertain in the future. So what we are applying here is actually the AI-enabled camera technology, to collect the data and the movement directly. From our sorting center, when you're loading, unloading, we don't need to be there on site. We check everybody's move, say what's the capacity they provided and whether they are doing it in the right way. Before, we use the process type of management. We check all the process elements. We check the KPIs. But now we don't. We use the IT person. They just read the report from the AR camera and also the IT system, they can recognize what's wrong activities the people did. And also for the retail chain and for the restaurant chain, the store manager, they don't need to spend any time to count the inventory in the store. They can use the back office IT system to know the results every day, like how many check-ins you sold, you sell, on a daily basis, and what's inventory at the store level, and how many, inventories should be on the way to the store tomorrow, and play the order automatically. That's actually from the post, the post machine side. You get all the supply chain information and the data visibility already, and then that can save a lot of efforts and the labor for you. That will be the post-virus thing, we are working on, and this is halfly, because of the virus, you have to do that. The other 50% is because, we are 500,000 companies. So we are thinking about people, you cannot really monitoring every tiny minor activities for them. They have to be, follow the IT system, follow the big data to decide what are the right things to do. So that's my lessons learned.
Good. Again, you are looking at your customer and you see a lot of opportunity for using AI, robotics. There is also another word called RPA. I think it stands for Robotic Process Automation. And when you use this new technology, you can reduce the number of people needed in many of the process managed by restaurants, by retailers. And when you can do that, you will be able to reduce costs. And in addition, you are less reliant on the people. So when your worker cannot come to work or they are not allowed to work, then you will still be able to operate your service system like restaurant and retailers. This is very good. Now, the next question is what will be the long-term impact of COVID-19 on the global supply chains in terms of supply chain network design? By that, I mean, are you going to change the location of your factory, your warehouse? Are you going to change your distribution network? Because you really need to consider risk. And if you put all your suppliers in China, all your factories in China, with this situation, are you going to think about maybe diversify your supplier base, location of your supplier? And another thing is how do you select, evaluate, and collaborate with your suppliers or your downstream customers? What we find is sometimes we focus a lot on the supplier's capability, but sometimes willingness, I think, is also very, very important. And during crises like this, you find some suppliers, some customers are very willing to really do extraordinary things to help you to solve the problem. But others may not really be that willing. So on this issue, I would like to ask our procurement manager, Stefano, first.
Thank you, Professor. It's an important question, and I try to answer again from a procurement standpoint, right? I see three major long-term impacts. Number one is about the supply footprint strategy revision, right, for a higher supply chain flexibility and responsiveness. To a certain extent, this started back already, a year and a half ago with the US tariff, and I think will continue even more given the COVID crisis. So companies will look for supply-based footprint diversification, which doesn't mean, at least from a Whirlpool standpoint, that we're gonna, get rid of all suppliers in China. Absolutely not. China is and will remain competitive from an overall cost proposition, which is not just price, but is total cost, including innovation and many other things, many other aspects. But it's really about risk management, right? And so diversification on the footprint is going to be definitely a key theme. And where to diversify, well, that's a key question mark, whether it's going to be Southeast Asia or eventually a relocation back to the home country close to the factory, right? So, but that's definitely a theme that will continue to be on top of every company's mind. The other one is about supply risk management, right? Tools and processes. And this is a big crisis, and many companies will not be able to overcome it. So I think it's important to be proactive in understanding whether companies, and in this case suppliers, for my case, will have financial distress, bankruptcy, insolvency, whatever. So use those tools that will help understand and mitigate the risk. Dual sourcing activation, somehow it's important. Again, back to what I was mentioning, footprint doesn't mean that we close a supplier in a country and then we relocate everything to another country. It means diversification, which means we have a supplier in China, but then we create a dual source in another country, which is, again, risk mitigation by keeping, those two suppliers still in the base, right? And also diversification of the logistic carriers, right? That allow timely response on dynamically switch routes, as I mentioned before, from sea to rail to air and vice versa. And the last point is really about finding the right global supply chain partner that is really able to integrate the company big data. So to a certain extent, it's really about these digital technologies and really having this integrated end-to-end supply chain. So building capabilities within the company, number one. So our internal supply chain should develop and get to the next level, but also finding externally the right 3PL, 4PL kind of partner able to integrate those data and really provide the best solution from an end-to-end standpoint, from a logistic, transportation, and cost optimization as well.
Good.
That's my sharing.
Very good. So you need to do diversification of your supplier base for both parts and material, and also for the 3PL. And you really need to consider risk as well as the cost and delivery that you used to do. How about Eddie?
Yeah, I think there's actually one interesting point, regarding whether people will move more like the ecosystem, the supplier system, actually into a regional base or nearby the OEMs, for example, in the future, instead of global sourcing, right? So I think some of the industry, they may think about the consolidation or actually close up the loop, right? They can move the suppliers close to their factory. But it will be difficult for most of the industry, given the globalization happened already. So it's really really difficult to step back. So I'm thinking about just echo the point mentioned earlier. The planning is more important in the future. While most of the time you have not enough time to do a good planning because the ships are waiting, the flights are waiting, right? So the time frame you have is actually stretching. So what you can do is that I think in the future I would suggest you have two types of supply chain. For more goods, you have a capacity-based, more so-called economic type of supply chain, which can consistently move the things around the materials globally for you, but you increase the part of the in-pipeline type of storage. Means like the containers, they are moving, actually more containers on the way, but with a slower speed. In that sense, you have the pipeline storage, which you still have some flexibility for different factories globally. But you move more expensive and actually, the critical parts into the aircraft side, because the speed is actually more reliable. Use this way, you have two types of supply chains for yourself. One get backup and the more expensive one, and also one more economic or more sustainable one, for your manufacturing. I think I see that in the consumer industry already. Actually, for the food industry, people are moving to that dimension. For the first type, people are saying, can I have a slower supply chain And actually I have less storage at store level, and I have a better planning for consumption of this storage. While, you know, for the premium demand side, I would still, you know, centralize more storage, and I would have a more high-speed type of last mile delivery to the consumers directly. So I think these two types of supply chain will be more popular in the future.
Good. This is a very good observation. Actually, there is an article published by Professor Xiande, which look at supply chain strategy. Actually, he classified supply chains into 4 types, depending on whether you have high, low demand uncertainty and high and low supply uncertainty. And depending on which quadrant you are in, you will be adopting either the low-cost, effective supply chain, which is based on economy of scale and lean, etc., to produce large volume of products and achieve low cost. Or alternatively, you can have fast response supply chain, or you can have risk batching supply chain. So it means you always do outsourcing, you consider alternative source of supplies, and you try to get a different supplier with different capacity, different inventory, so that if you have risk, then you will always have the other ones to use. That's a so-called risk batching. And then the last type, which is more difficult, is on the front end, you have the fast response, responsive supply chain. And then in the back end, you do the outsourcing, you do the risk batching. And that's what we call agile supply chain. So more and more companies, after these bad experiences, they're going to find, depending on the nature of the product and the process, you may have to find a different type of supply chains to support different supply chain operations. So that's a very good point. And then lastly, let's invite Damon again to take on this last question.
Yeah, thanks, Professor. I also have 3 key points to share here. I think many people believe, I personally also believe, that the COVID-19 impact, some of them will be short-term, and once everything is back to normal, that we will just operate back in the business as usual scenario. But I actually believe there's a lot of impact from the COVID-19 situation will become a long-term or even a permanent impact from the supply chain management perspective. So my take is, number one, the supply chain resilience and agility, as we discussed many times on this session, will become a more strategic issue for many of the companies. Because typically on a normal situation, the supply chain management and logistics management is more like a tactical or operational issue, right? And I've been enjoying a lot of customer engagement also recently after the crisis started. And you start to see more and more C-level stakeholders to join these discussions because they realize the supply chain challenge is not an operational or tactical challenge anymore. This is much more down to the strategic level and even impacting their overall business model. So that's the first point. The second thing is, I think one of the key impact is the so-called digitalization of the supply chain will become a much more important topic, both for from our customer perspective, but also from the logistics service provider. As Stefan already mentioned, that they are seeking some global partner to also support this journey. And many of the companies are struggling just using the in-house capability to really connect all the dots, right? So my view is this COVID-19 situation will also push for a more close collaboration, if you like, in the industry, both from the customer perspective, but also the logistics service provider perspective, to work together and really achieve this end-to-end visibility kind of a vision. And then the last but not least, I think my observation in the current global supply chain is very typically a lot of the customers or global customers, they tend to cut their supply chain into 2 larger pieces. One is the inbound logistics, all the way from sourcing to their distribution center. The other way is the outbound logistics, where they start to distribute the products to the end consumer or the stores, right? And I think now we already see many of the companies start to integrate and connect the dots for both supply and demand. And there's a more and more omni-channel solution available in the market where people or most of these companies start to connect the consumer demand more directly with their sourcing base. And you start to see many companies offer online customer-made orders and the delivery from store and delivery from even the manufacturing base. And I think that trend will definitely continue and hopefully also change the overall scope of the supply chain management moving forward. So that would be my take.
Very good. Again, 3 excellent points. One is supply chain is not just an operational issue. And when you look at things like agility, resilience, versus lean, efficient, etc., you are really talking about due to the difference in your business strategy. You need to have a different supply chain strategy and capabilities. Only when you connect your supply chain strategy, supply chain capability to your business strategy, to your business model, your company will be successful. So your C-level executive will really have to get involved with supply chain. And then secondly, the end-to-end visibility and close collaboration is really very important. So you cannot really own everything in the supply chain. Especially in this global world, you have to be able to leverage over resources and capabilities from other partners. And then the last one he mentioned is really the end-to-end supply chain integration. It's not only the technology, you need to integrate the inbound process, outbound process, and the technology is only a tool for you to link the different processes together. In addition to the technology tool, you need to bring down the barriers between different departments, different organizations. The relationship management actually is very, very important. So from these 3 practitioners, I can see a lot of knowledge coming in, and as a professor every day, I get excited to see they are doing the innovative practice, and I can look at this practice and be able to summarize some theory and be able to connect whatever they have said together. And with that, I think it is time for us to go for the question and answer. And Felicia will facilitate this part. And then towards the end, I'll try to make a summary.
Thank you, Professor, and our panelists for the great session. We have received several questions from our audience and would like to invite you and our panelists to answer it. Due to the time constraint, we have selected 3 questions for you. The first one is for Eddie. So Eddie, would you like please specify the innovative supply chain management practice to take a slow case, please, from demand forecasting to the warehousing and delivery? How exactly does it work? Eddie, would you like to answer it?
So I just give you one example of the restaurant store. So normally what we don't know part, when they close down the shop, the store manager will spend like 2 hours time to count how many they sell. Actually, like the teas, the chicken wings, or everything, they have to count the inventory. And actually, only after you close down the shop, you know what's the inventory still in the store, and also what's the order for you, to place for next day operation. So that's actually not real time, and that's actually take a lot of labor time, and that's actually not creating customer value because you are not talking to customer. That's actually back office operation. So what we do is that we use this kind of AI camera. So whenever you take a cake, for example, the camera actually record. So one sales happened already, and then they compare to the storage still in the restaurant, and then they place order to the supplier, say, what other storage should be underway, and if it's frozen thing, then how to do the defrozen thing, prepare for sale. So in that sense, just like Damon said, we actually connect the downstream to the upstream, to the supplier side. So every inventory is actually dynamic all the time. So nobody actually wasting time waiting for the order. It's a real-time order and a real-time delivery, and there's no shortage of sales. So that's actually what we are doing. This is not really use the people system. You cannot do that. You have to use the camera, big data to calculate. And also, it's very critical, for restaurants to look at the temperature, weather forecast for tomorrow. Because if it's raining, people are not going to the restaurants or less. So these are the things, we have to do, use the system and also big data to look at the forecast and play real-time order to the suppliers. So just one example.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eddie. So the second question is for the professor and Stefano. So the question is, will some lean supply chain practices, such as just-in-time inventory model, will it be changed after the pandemic? Professor, would you like to talk about this now?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the JIT system, which has been practiced for years, many of the times it works well in terms of quality, in terms of low inventory, low cost. But I think for certain critical parts, we also have to think about the risk and the resilience. So if this part is very, very important, very critical. Without it, I cannot really do the product. If I have a single supplier, I have no inventory, but at the same time, I have a global supply chain. I know in certain parts of the supply chain, there is a risk. Then you're going to find that type of practice will not really work very well. You have to have some contingency planning, and you will have to probably introduce an alternative supplier. You may have to have some inventory in order to avoid the situation where your entire supply chain will stop due to the shortage of one material from one critical supplier.
Thank you, Professor. So Stefano, would you like to add anything on the question?
No, I think Professor really answered very well. It's all about risk, right? So risk management, supply risk management is going to be even more important in the coming weeks and months and years after this COVID crisis. So how to assess this and how to make decisions based on data, right? So again, I don't believe just-in-time will disappear completely. It's about, the risk assessment, right? Whether I have my supply in which location, whether I have a dual source in place, what is the financial situation of the supply. So adding those data on an integrated manner and very visible, real time, I think that will be the key to make the right decision and then optimize your inventory position, whether it's regional or global.
Well, thank you very much, Stefano. Our third question is for Damon. It's about PDA. The question is, do you think the digitalized, technology-driven supply chain model in China are duplicable to the global market? What do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Felicia. I think it's a very good question. I think the short answer is yes. But I think there is a lot of difference in the global market. So for us in the supply chain industry, we will, I'm very happy to share that actually in terms of the digitalization and innovation, China is actually one of the leading countries in the world, where in developed country, you will be quite surprised to see that many of the supply chain practices actually still very traditional, even outdated, right? I think that there are many reasons behind that, and e-commerce is a big driver behind that. That if you look at very successful companies like Alibaba or Amazon, their supply chain management and logistic capability has actually become one of the key factors or drivers behind their business success. So back to the question, yes, I definitely see there's a trend and more companies start to realize the digitalization of supply chain is such a critical issue for them. But everyone has a different kind of a starting point. And I think China, in this sense, is actually leading on a global level. And I really hope that we can also keep that innovation going on and become one of the leaders in the world to drive this innovation moving forward.
Yeah, thank you very much, Damon. So actually we have I would like to ask one more question, the last question to our professor. It's about the SME. It's from Greece. The question is, we're already seeing some cases that bargaining power being shifted from OEMs to supplier under the circumstance now. After the COVID-19, do you think the MSES will have a tougher situation in terms of the bargaining power and how to improve that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Also a difficult question. I think this is also related to digitization. So on the one side, you see if you do not really adopt digital technology, big data analytics, etc., your ability to deal with the crisis is dramatically decreased. Your speed of response, accuracy of response, and your resilience will not be as good. But at the same time, what you're going to find, many of those OEMs do not really have enough financial resources to adopt the technology. They also do not have the people who understand the technology. And on top of that, during this crisis, we also see the needs to have supply chain financing. And when we look at the supply chain, on the one side, you have big giants like Whirlpool, like Haier, and they have many different suppliers. And if the big core company, what we call in supply chain finance term, they have the power and they try to kind of squeeze the supplier by kind of delaying payment to them, then the supplier under situations like this will become very difficult for them to continue with the supply chain. And through this crisis, I do see many different companies who have quite different practices. Actually, we are also doing a project with some practitioners and some professors in the US, looking at how COVID-19 will change the way people select and manage the supplier relationships. And what we discover is some companies, when COVID-19 comes, they try to push down the price from the supplier, and they also delay the payment. Actually, I just got an email today saying one company is pushing down the price by 30%. And at the same time, they delay the payment. And if that's the case, I think the supply will die soon. Then how can that company really have the supply chain? On the other hand, you also see other companies which says, I know now it is a difficult time, but you as my supplier, you are valuable and you are weaker than me. And then I'm going to give you the payment faster. And in return, you should really try to give me the needed supply earlier than to the competitor. So what you're going to find is the way you manage the supply chain relationship will have a great deal of impact. So to conclude, for the SMEs, you have limited resources, try to find the suitable partner. Join the right supply chain, join the right ecosystem. If you do not have the technology, try to use theirs. If you do not have the financial resources, you work hard, try to help them to solve their problem that they cannot solve. At the same time, you also hope your partner will take care of you. At a critical moment like this, they may give you the money earlier rather than later.
Thank you very much, Professor. So this will be the end of the Q&A session. Now, I would like to invite Professor Zhao to give a summary of today's session and the topic we talked about today. Please, Professor.
Yeah, actually, I have some PPT prepared. Since we are late already, actually I have some more questions for the three of them. Maybe I'm not going to ask them now due to the fact that we are delayed a little bit and we have very good discussions. So I'll just go to the summaries. From all these discussions, what do we see? Okay. Regularly, when we are managing supply chain, many people will be talking about price, cost. How do I find the supplier which will give me lower cost? How do I build the supply chain which will give me lower cost? And another word is quality. So through the lean thinking, you'll be able to improve quality, reduce cost, and hopefully also improve delivery. But under COVID-19, you repeatedly hear people talking about speed and responsiveness. And this is one of the important R's that refers to the ability to respond quickly and accurately to the fast-changing customer demand and the market needs. One is what type of products they want, and during this crisis, people need high-quality masks. It has to meet certain quality specification. At the same time, they need that fast. They need that in large volume. Can you design, manufacture, and deliver the right specification products to the right location at the right time to meet the needs of the customer? And this is very, very important. You see Sun Feng saying, rather than planning by the months, now we are planning by the hour and maybe by the minutes. And that's an indication of being responsive. And then the other R is the word resilience, which refers to the ability to recover quickly from the impact of external disasters. It can be epidemic like this, it can be hurricane, it can be earthquake. So the words resilience meaning if you are smashed, you are crushed, some part of the supply chain get interrupted, can you repair it quickly? Can you respond under these external bad influences? And when we have these two R's, responsiveness and resilience, you are going to find your supply chain will give you added competitive advantage under situations like COVID-19. Now, the question is, how do we build the 2R supply chain? Actually, to improve the 2R capabilities, I can see several modules of capability. One is speed. When we need to improve speed in the supply chain, there are two major things we can do. One is, for each process, we shorten the lead time so that we will be able to design faster, manufacture faster, delivery faster. And when you can do that, the entire supply chain will be able to respond to the needs faster. And then the other trick is you completely knock off certain process. That means using technology, you can reduce the number of layers in the supply chain so that you will be able to connect to the final consumer, and you will be able to, based on the consumer needs, to design the products and then make the product and then send it directly to their home. And that will have much shorter processes in the supply chain than the regular traditional supply chain where you have multiple layers of distributors. And that's how you improve speed. But in order to improve speed, you need visibility. I'm going to talk about that later. And the other one is the so-called flexibility. Flexibility actually has two dimensions. One is when my customer wants more, want less, want that in a different location, can I do it? And another one is when my customer want different products, can I change the design and be able to do it? So these two dimensions of flexibility are the so-called volume flexibility and also the mix flexibility. For the flexibility and the speed, you need to, number one, use digital technology to link the different parts of the supply chain together. That's what we call supply chain visibility. When you have visibility throughout the supply chain, you will be able to respond faster. You will be able to adjust what you do based on what the customer wants. Want the customer want different volume, wants different product configuration, etc. you will be able to do it. And then the other dimension is supply chain collaboration. By that, I mean to meet the needs of different customers at different time with high and low volumes. You cannot really have all the resources and capabilities to do that yourself. So you have to be able to integrate your partner's resources, and you need to design the proper collaboration mechanism so that your supplier will be willing to use their resources and capabilities to help you to do things that you think are valuable for the customer. And you have to have the right process and the procedures to work out how the work will be allocated among you and the suppliers, how the process between your company and your supplier and your partner's company will be integrated together. If you do a good job with picking the right partner, work effectively with them, you have the technology to link the different parts together, most likely you will have speed, you will have flexibility. And then another thing, in order to really improve the 2R, is to have a certain degree of redundancy. By that, we means you may have dual sourcing. And adopting the JIT term, maybe one supplier might be redundant, or maybe you may not really need that resources all the time, but under uncertain situations, you may need it. You may have a little bit excess inventory at safety stock. You may have a little extra cash in case something happens. You can still use that to keep your supply chain flow. So these are the basic capability modules you need. But in terms of how to do it, I think number one, you have to adopt digital technology to improve the end-to-end visibility of the supply chain. And our panelist has consistently emphasized on this. And then secondly, you have to apply big data analytics and AI to automate and optimize supply chain processes and also optimize decisions. And if you have the digital technology so that you'll be able to collect data in different supply chain processes, and you have the capability to integrate these data, and you have the capability to build models, use the big data analytic techniques to help you to make the decision better, most likely your supply chain will become faster, and at the same time, maybe the cost will be lower too. And another thing is you need to enhance supply chain collaboration with the proper relationship management and supplier selection methods. And under crisis like this, you'll find some suppliers really go out of the way to collaborate and innovate with you. And these suppliers show extraordinary willingness to help you. And sometimes the supplier which has the best capability, but they do not have the willingness, may not be the most helpful to you. And then next, you need to redesign the supply chain network and map the process in the entire network. Many of us try to manage the first-tier supplier, but unless you understand your entire supply chain network and be able to map the different processes between the different layers of suppliers, you do not know why your supply chain certain parts had stopped. And if you have visibility, you have the process mapping, then you will be able to solve the problem with some parts of the supply chain so that the interrupted supply part will not really influence you that badly. Next, we need to establish a supply chain risk management function, and we need to make contingency plans. Actually, I talked to Shunfeng, and they have a corporate level risk management function under crisis like COVID-19. the needs of the customer get passed to the company headquarters, and they have headquarter office, they have a project manager who will be able to integrate resources from multiple organizations within the group, and they will be able to solve your problem. I think the PMO idea that Stefano was talking about also belong to this category. Enterprises, you need to have cross-functional communication and collaboration. And if you have a contingency plan, you have the process, then you can do that much more effectively. Next, you need to follow the change in consumer demands. Through this crisis, we are going to find a lot of people now have the habits of ordering online, and you have to really design the omni-channel. And if you did not have the online part, now you will have to really work hard to set up the omni-channel so that you will have longer-term competitive advantage. Lastly, you also need to maintain the proper level of redundancy, which balance the consideration of risk and the efficiency. And with that, I have to conclude my presentation today. And let us thank our panelists for sharing so many insightful observations and successful experiences, and also some maybe lessons that they have learned. And I hope more of you in the audience will be able to join CEIBS, and we will be dealing with all these challenges together. And if you want to learn more about supply chain, I have the QR code of my research center. This is the Center for Innovation in Supply Chain and Services, funded by the Global Logistics Properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
So, Professor, we know you and your team has put a lot of time and effort into this. We're very grateful for it. The session is very informative and inspiring. And also, I would like to say big thanks to our panelists, Stefano, Eddie, and Damon. I know you put a lot of efforts and time, and also your personal time, the weekend, to prepare for the information. So, because of this can give us different perspective regarding the topic, and I'm sure they're very beneficial for our audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to the last part of today's session. So today we have around 200 in the audience who have joined the session. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you had a great learning experience. We have regular events such as this, and we hope you can join more in the future. For those of you in the audience who are potentially interested in joining this Global EMB program in future, we're now going to have an optional additional session for about 10 minutes. And I hand things over to my colleague, Marcel. Marcel is a senior marketing manager at CEIBS Global EMB office. He will give you an introduction of the program and invite our CEIBS Gamba alumni, Stefano and Damon, to share their thoughts on the program too.
Thank you very much, Felicia. It's a real pleasure to have the chance to say a few words at the end of such a fantastic and informative presentation. So thank you to the professor and to our panelists. Great to see a few familiar faces there, Damon and Stefano, and thank you. I will ask you to stay on with me for this 10-minute intro, and in a few minutes we'll also ask you to share your impressions of the Global MBA program. So as Felicia mentioned, some of you in the audience are CEIBS alumni or students, but some of you are perhaps thinking about becoming a student in the future. So we just want to introduce a little bit about the Global Executive MBA program. So this program is a part-time program for executives. It is a 20-month long program that starts every year in October, November. This year we're starting in October. It is, as I say, part-time, but some of the time spent studying will be you'll need to spend out of the office. So it's always very important that our students have a supportive organization. And we estimate around about 45 days is what's required for the program over the 2 years, outside of the office commitment from you. The program, most of the modules will take place in Shanghai, but every student on the Global EMBA will go outside of China at least 4 times over the 2 years for various global modules that we have, which is a very important focus of the program. And I'll talk about them a bit more later. At the bottom of the screen there, you can see we have a flexible format for our program. We do understand that as busy executives, you have a lot going on in your professional and family lives. So we offer 2 options for our students. You can either choose to take classes once every month for 4 days at a time, or you can take classes every 2 months for around about 8 or 9 days consecutively for a module there. So we provide that flexibility for you to be able to fit into your own work progress. Thank you. So this is how the program looks over the 20 months. So what we begin with is a very important leadership module. This is the first step you have on campus with the program. As an 8-day module. We have all our students in one place here in Shanghai, led by a leadership professor with around 30 or 35 executive coaches that come here, and you as a student will be assigned one of those. Even though our students are already high achieving executives in management roles, it is important, we think, to really kick off the program and help our students to understand what kind of leader they are so they can develop over the remaining 20 months of the program. After that, we go through our core modules. You can see there that takes place over approximately the first 10 or 11 months of the program. We do also have compulsory global modules. There are 2 that are compulsory, one in Zurich and one in Barcelona. And then for the second half of the program, the last 10 months approximately is when things get really interesting. It's the elective stage. Many of the electives will be here in Shanghai or Beijing or Shenzhen, where we also have campuses, but actually we offer many electives outside of China as well. So there's a real chance to customize your learning journey and to really see new geographies in the world and to learn about global business in that way. Towards the end of the program, you will also complete what's called a capstone project, which you might think of like a thesis. This is a project where you and a group will look at a business challenge or business opportunity that one of your teammates' own company is going through. So it really draws together the different factors or aspects of the program in an integrative fashion. And then we conclude with once again, a kind of a reflexive session where leadership is again a very big focus. Thank you. If I could take the next slide. Thank you. So I think you've had a great example already today of our faculty, of a Professor Zhao Xiande, which was a great example of the kind of up-to-date and sort of cutting-edge knowledge that the faculty provide. This is just a few professors that we do have on the program. I think one of the unique aspects of CEIBS, and particularly the Global EMBA, is the mixture between the foreign faculty and the Chinese faculty. So around about 60% of our professors are international, but in most cases they will be here, based in China, researching here, obviously teaching here, and very much engaged with Chinese companies, and in many cases writing Chinese case studies as well. And then our Chinese professors, and you can see a couple of fantastic examples on the screen there, Professor Ding Yuan and Professor Catherine Shen, are originally Chinese, but with enormous experience internationally as well. So we're always balancing that China and that global factor throughout. Thank you, Yoko. Next slide. Great. This is a look at our class profile. And if you're very, very careful, you might see on the left-hand side there is a certain Stefano. So good to get you in the photo there. This is just a kind of the data from last year's class. So our most recent intake, which started last year in November. So we have 107 students split into the 2 tracks that I mentioned, the monthly or the bi-monthly option. And you can see here, not just from the photo, but from the data too, that it's a real diverse group. Just under half the class is international, over 40% of the class is female, and it really is a very experienced group as well, on average 15 years of work experience. So we really are talking about decision makers, managers who are in the mid to senior stage in your career. And I think we've got, you know, two great examples of global MBA alums from Damon and Stefano today. Next, thank you. This is a slide just quickly looking at some of the global elective options that we provide, which I mentioned before. So you really have the chance to customize your kind of global journey. This is towards the second half of the program. Every participant has to choose two, or at least two of these global electives. Some people choose more. So you really have the chance to go across 5 continents. And the modules themselves are not typical. They are not much time in the classroom. It's more time spent out in the field, visiting companies, visiting industry experts, learning from local professors. So it's a real immersive experience in these various locations. Next slide, thank you. One thing just to mention as well is the strength of the program and how it's been recognized. Our program is ranked number 5 in the world by Financial Times, and we have been in the top 5 for the past 2 years. Financial Times generally regarded as the kind of most prominent sort of ranking for business school programs. And that puts us as the #1 program in mainland China and the #1 standalone EMBA program in Asia. There's many partnership programs, but CEIBS is a standalone global EMBA program. Now, we would never say for someone to make a decision entirely on ranking, but at least you can be sure that this program is right up there with the top in the world. Thank you. Next slide. I won't go into too much detail on application process, but our program begins in October and we are still taking applications. We actually have 2 application rounds remaining. Our first 2 application rounds have passed just last week, in fact. So still plenty of time if you want to consider applying for this year. The last chance you'd have is that 4th round on the 23rd of August. Everyone needs to complete an admission test. This is called executive assessment, and you can see the website there where you can find all the information you need about that test. All our applicants need to complete an admission interview as well, which is the final step before we give you an admission decision. Thank you. Next. Great. So now I'd just like to ask Damon and Stefano. We've obviously seen your great knowledge in the supply chain area, but I think it would be useful for our audience just to hear, if we could, just a couple of minutes, if you could share a little bit about your experience with CEIBS and with Global EMBA. Maybe Damon, you started in 2015, but so you've graduated a few years, but if you could share a little bit first with us. Thanks, Damon.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Marcel. It's a little bit crazy to think about. It's already 5 years since we first met and started the whole program, right? So I'm happy to share. So I think I want to share 3 maybe main personal experience in connection with the CEIBS experience. The first one is the program itself. I think, as Marcel mentioned, this is a fantastic program that putting a lot of different elements. And my personal experience was, it was a fantastic challenge, actually, both from a physical and a mental perspective. So a quick kind of a warning, a message to the audience here to say, if you're not ready for this big challenge, then you need to think twice. But I want to say this in a very positive way, that the program itself really push everyone to the limit in terms of your thinking, your handling of all the classes, and your studying, and while you at the same time you are still working at the same time, right? So to me, it was really a great experience to push myself to the limit. But luckily, I think everyone in our class handled this extremely well. So the program itself is actually a very challenging one. Just to be aware of that. The second thing is, I think we benefit significantly from several parts of the network. The first part is the classmates, of course. And I think for me personally, many of the classmates become lifetime friends and even like family members, right? And we still keep in touch. We have a lot of debate on a regular basis. We have catch-up sessions. I'm based in Hong Kong, so this is a little bit challenging for me to have that interaction more on a regular basis. But every time I'm traveling back to Shanghai or someone is traveling to Hong Kong, then we try to catch up. So the classmates, it's a fantastic group, very diversified with different background. Then the second thing is the alumni network. So events like today is a perfect example to say, how do we leverage the knowledge and experience from the entire school's alumni network, connecting with the professors, talking about the latest business issues and whatever the response from different industries. And I think I benefit a lot also from that kind of introduction. The last but not least part, it's a bonus point for me, again, looking at Marcel here and also Felicia, that I think we also have a fantastic team in the CEIBS admission office, and they've been providing a fantastic support during the program, but also after the graduation, we also keep in touch, and they typically invite me to join these sessions. And again, I'm always happy to share my personal experience here. And the last thing is then also the career impact. I think for me, specifically, even before I graduate from the EMBA program, I already took a new global role in my company. And I honestly, to reflect on that, I think I wouldn't be able to take that opportunity if I hadn't enrolled in the CEIBS Global EMBA program, because the global role requires a little bit different competence level and a global perspective compared with my previous roles. And I was always having an international career, but I was focusing more on the regional issue, or maybe specifically within China with my root there, right? So I think from the career perspective, if you really want to drive an international career with the global perspective, then this is highly recommended from my side to take the experience and maybe push up or gear up your career development as well. So I will stop here and hand back to Marcel, and it's always a great pleasure to share my perspectives.
Thank you very much, Damon. Thank you also for the kind words. Stefano, obviously a slightly different perspective from you. You only joined the program late last year, so early days for you, and it has been a little disrupted, obviously, this year with everything that's going on. But it'll be great to hear a little bit about your perspective so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share my short experience. I will start first sharing with you the criteria why I choose CEIBS, right? And I would say, and then I find all of them absolutely met when I joined this program back in November 19. So 3 main criteria, I would say. Number 1 is the flexibility of the program. For me, that was very important. I travel a lot, I have a busy agenda, so CEIBS was really offering, I think, one of the best, if not really the best, executive MBA program in terms of flexibility with these, once in a month class with a full weekend and 2 working days. So flexibility from a class standpoint, but also flexibility from a footprint standpoint. I come from Italy. I'm here based in Shanghai, so it was perfect. But also, in case I will repatriate back to Europe, I have an hub in Zurich where I can go and continue my studies. So that flexibility plays a very important role. The other one was really about the global breadth, the international breadth of the program, but also of the alumni composition, the class composition. It was there on the brochure. Marcel presented. That's more marketing. I really found it in real life. So when I joined the class, I really found myself surrounded by Chinese, but French, German, Italian, 2 Italian, and with me 3 US, Africa. So it's really an international program from educational standpoint with the professor, but also when it comes to the people that you will go with this journey together for 20 months. The other one, even more important, I would say, it was really about the composition of the class, which is really well designed in a way that you don't have only corporate professionals and executive, but you also have a lot of entrepreneurs. So for me, it's important. I've been spending my past 15 years in corporate world. I really wanted to have more an experience, a network, and learning from different perspectives. So I found a lot of people with their own company, so a lot of entrepreneurial leadership that it was really, and it's still very important for me to learn from. Those were the three main criteria that I really found when I joined this program. And you know, we just had a couple of classes. The first one, which is a full week, very intense on leadership, which was really an eye-opener, not only to know better your team members, but also to know yourself. And the other one was economic analysis. Professor Bala was an incredible experience. Again, two important international professors. So again, back to the global and international breadth of the program. So that's it's been my experience so far. Again, back to what Demo was mentioning before, it's going to be challenging. So bear in mind that you need to spend a lot of time into that. It's not going to be something easy, but it's something absolutely rewarding.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stefano. Thank you to you both. I know how valuable it is to prospective candidates and applicants and so on to hear from alumni, people who are studying right now, as well, you know, about how the program is. So thank you both for your honest sharing, and thank you, of course, also for the hard work and the panel, which was fantastic too. Thank you. So that brings to the end the session that we have today. I did just want to highlight one event that we do have coming up on April 21st. This is open to the general public, so anyone is welcome to join this. This is our acting associate dean, Professor Jeffrey Sampler, fantastic professor who is really into kind of digital strategy, and he's looking at developing a strategic agility in these challenging times right now. So if anyone is interested to join that future online event on April 21st, please scan that QR code, and it would be great to see you there and to join that session. Next slide, please. And thank you again just to the audience for joining. I know it's been now quite a long session, but thank you for staying with us through till now. If you do have any questions at all about the program, you know, we're here to help. Please don't hesitate to get in touch. On the left-hand side there, you can see that's our WeChat account, which you can scan. Of course, our website there, which is in the middle, where you'll find most information. But absolutely, please feel free to drop me an email. My name's Marcel. It's my email there on the right-hand side. Very happy to answer any questions you have about the program. I think today you've seen a good example from professors to alumni to the panel and so on. So we'd welcome your further inquiries. Thanks again for tuning in and staying through till the end now. Really appreciate it. Thank you.